Bali's luxury travel scene is world-class and actually outperforms a lot of the other luxury experiences we've had in other countries, including Australia.
Hello, my name is Renae Leith-Manos. Welcome to this podcast, Where To From Here, featuring conversations about luxury travel and how it's changing in every pocket of the globe. So I'm here today talking to this amazing woman, Karlie Cummins, who is truly living the dream of so many people all over the world. She has left her pedestrian Western life in Queensland, in Australia, to live full-time in Bali with her family. But what makes her story really unique is it was a business idea she had to create an online business about everything in Bali that ultimately led her whole family to live there. So she's going to tell us all about it. Karlie, welcome on board.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to finally meet you. Being Australian, I mean, I know you grew up in a really rural environment in central Queensland. I mean, did you ever think back then that you would end up living this dream life as you are in Bali?
Definitely not. You know, the idea, I grew up in a small town with 10,000 people and then went to university in Townsville to become a teacher. And no, it was never really on my radar to move overseas. So I definitely didn't think, even when the business started, I didn't think we'd end up living here. But, 4 years after the business started and 7 years ago, we moved over.
Fantastic. And you run one of the most successful online platforms in Southeast Asia in the travel industry. Talk us through how it started and how you monetized it.
So I call it my business by accident because actually when it started, it was a page, it was a Facebook page when Facebook first came out with pages to give my friends tips on traveling to Bali, because they always used to contact me saying, you go to Bali all the time. What villa do you stay in? Where do you go? What do you do? So Facebook was still quite new 11 years ago, and pages were very new. So I thought, instead of sending out my little notes to my friends all the time, I'll just put everything I know about Bali on a Facebook page, which is why I called it Bali Buddies, because it was for my buddies. Little did I know back then that Facebook was really pushing that pages tool. So within a couple of months, I had an audience on that page of about 10,000 people.
Wow.
And tons of messages going, can you help me plan my travel to Bali? Can you help me plan? And, you know, I really didn't know how to run a travel agency. And I rang one of my friends who had a villa and I said, if I can get people to stay in your villa, can you pay me some sort of commission without it costing them anymore? And he was like, yes, that's called being a travel agent. So of course we can do that. So initially Bali Buddies was a travel agency. For the first 4 years, Bali Buddies was an Australian company that provided travel agency service to mostly Australians, an experienced travel agent on board, and we were planning tons of holidays. But then a couple of years in, as our Instagram grew, our website traffic grew, also the need for digital media platforms grew in the industry, because that was a time where print media was slowly being overtaken by digital media. So we started to get approached by lots of services and businesses saying, hey, can you come in and can you review us? Can you write about our packages that we have on sale? And of course, they wanted to pay us to do that. And so that's when Bali Buddies Bali Buddies Media was born, which is our Indonesian-based company, which is, we don't operate any longer as a travel agency. We ended up closing that during COVID. And today we're 100% a digital media platform now.
Wow. It's just such a great story, isn't it? And you're opening another one, which is going to be on the whole of Indonesia, yeah?
Yeah. So during COVID, obviously we couldn't travel back home to Australia or really anywhere. So we did a lot of domestic travel, and it really opened our eyes to just how many hidden gems there are in Indonesia, even outside of Bali. And of course, especially for the Australian market, they're very familiar with Bali.
Yes.
But not so familiar with Greater Indonesia. And I really saw a need there to be able to show these areas and make them easier to travel to. So Indo Buddies will launch later this year. We're building it at the moment, and it will be a guide to traveling to, the other beautiful areas in Indonesia, whether you tack that on as an extra holiday from Bali, or whether you just want to go and visit there directly.
How exciting. I know, having lived in Indonesia myself, there's just so much to it. And one of the scary things when you talk to anyone from outside of Indonesia about it is, oh, well, how do I get there? And how do I organize that? And so I think you're very wise in sort of opening, the world up. And I hope that wonderful Indonesia, which is a government-run travel brand, I hope that they're supporting it, because it will really, really bring people to the country.
Yeah, so we are working with both the Australian government and the Indonesian government on Indo Buddies to make sure our messaging is in line with, the types of tourists they want to attract, and also that, we can expose it, especially to the Australian audience, because they're so close. So there's so many beautiful destinations that they can get to so easily from home.
Fantastic. Now, when did it become clear that you were actually going to move, from Australia to Bali? And was that a big shift for your family? Like, were they shocked? Did you tell them, or how did it all happen?
It was a shock. It definitely was a shock, because it hadn't been something we'd ever even spoken about. And probably from when I started to feel it was about 3 years into the business, and I was traveling over here more regularly, and I was like, oh, I can really see us being here. And I knew I could build the business a lot easier once we were here.
Yes.
Really, pretty much from when I had that idea, we were living here within 10 months, I think, of that. So it was a bit of a shock. And I know that when we said it, a few people probably were like, yeah, sure, you're going to move over there. But no, it all happened, and the kids were on board, and everyone was on board with it. And we were like, what's the worst that can happen? We have to move back. So we pretty much sold up most of everything we had. So it was never like, well, let's just go try it for a year. We sold all our furniture. We sold our car. We sold some of our properties. It was like, no. If we're doing it, we're going. And we moved over here with, I think, like, between the four of us, 150 kilos of luggage, and then started the new life.
Wow. And would you recommend it to other people? Because I know, everyone at the moment, the cost of living, particularly in Australia and Europe, is so expensive. I have friends that have just moved from London to Bali. Everyone is talking about it. Would you recommend it? And what are the positives and negatives of life in Bali?
Look, we love it and have never regretted it for a day since we moved here, but it's not for everyone. We've also seen some people come and have different expectations of what life was going to be here, and you see those people quickly turn around and go back. Sometimes within the year they go back. But for us,
sorry, what are the main reasons when you say expectations?
I think some people move here expecting it to be Australia, and it's just not. Things happen more slowly here. You don't have a Coles and Woolworths that you can go to, and it's got everything there. You kind of have to go and get this here and this here and this here. There's a language barrier. There's things that it's not Australia when you move here, and things do happen differently here. But then we see people come over here and really embrace it. There's a lot of the expats in Bali say, either you move here and Bali really opens up its arms and it embraces you, or you move here and if you're not right for the island, it kind of pushes you out really quickly.
Really interesting. And what do you miss about life in Australia?
What do I miss? So obviously my family, I used to live super close to my family, and every Sunday night we'd go to my mum's for dinner. So I do miss seeing them on a regular basis. I miss mud crab, definitely. And it's always something I want to get when I go back. And like Coles and Woolworths, I do like, that's a real treat for us when we go back there and we're like, oh, everything's just in one place.
Yes. And also there's Western food that you can't buy in Bali, right? There's certain things.
Yeah, it has. So the development over the last 7 years of what you can get access to here now is really, there's not a lot. We used to go back and we'd stock up on like all these things that we couldn't get here. And I just find ourselves not really doing that anymore, because we can get access to most of those things now, like good cheeses and things like that.
Yes. Well, I imagine that all the 5-star hotels there need them as well.
Yeah. And during COVID, it really opened up the suppliers. They had to really reach out to not just businesses, but individuals. So then now I guess we have all of those contacts that we didn't have pre-COVID. Now we know how to get access to like well-priced imported cheese or cold meats or steaks and things like that.
Yeah, you learn over time, don't you? And what about the visa situation? Because it's changed a lot, hasn't it? It's actually a lot easier now. Can you talk us through that?
Changed a lot and continues to keep changing. So we
Very
get this.
Indonesian.
Yes, very Indonesian. You know, it comes out and it's all gray and then it gets scrapped and then there's a new thing in. So they tried the second home visa. It's still going at the moment, but it was kind of, it seems to be like it's not really working because they required so much investment into the country to get that second home visa. Most people are moving over here at the moment. So we have a lot of what I call tempats, which are temporary expats, people who want to take a gap here. They're working online. So they're like, well, why don't we just go and live somewhere else for a year? So a lot of the tempats are over here on the B211 visa, which allows you to stay for up to 6 months at a time. Then you need to exit the country and then you can come back in on another one.
Is that the digital nomad visa or is that a different one?
Well, so they never actually came out with a digital nomad visa. They spoke about it a lot, but they never came out. They just said that you can use the B211 as a digital nomad visa.
I see. Okay.
So up until now, so that's what most people, if they don't want to set up a company here, that's what most people are living here on, is those B211s.
And how much is that visa? Do you know?
Yes, because my daughter's turning 18, she now is not she can't be on our company residence. So she just come back in last night on a B211 visa. And I think it cost, I think it was $500 for the setup. Okay. And then you've got to do 2 extensions during that time, which is about $150 each time, which can add up if you're a family, if you're all doing that. It's definitely a cost you have to factor in. But if you're looking at moving here for the long term, then you need to look at a way to get on a KITAS. And that's either by starting your own company here, getting employed by a company here, which is not easy. Like a lot of expats, a lot of people wanting to move here think it's easy to get a job, but as a foreigner, it's really not easy to get a job here. It's far easier to set up your own endeavor and your own business. Or if you're over 55, you can still access a retirement visa.
Okay. And what's that all about?
So that one's like, if you're over 55 and you can prove that you've got funds to live, they can put you on a residence visa that you renew yearly, but doesn't allow you to work.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
The other big cost that people talk about is health insurance, because, you know, if you're living there, particularly if you get an ongoing sort of illness, you need really good insurance, right?
Yeah, there's really good so there's choices. If you're just coming for the year, probably the easiest thing to do is get like a 1-year travel insurance to cover you. And a lot of you just need to really read your product disclosure statement well to make sure whatever you're doing covers you, because some insurance agencies will allow you to take a multi-entry year insurance, but it actually says you can only stay outside of Australia for 45 days at a time. You need to read it and make sure the one that you take covers you for traveling around for a year or however long they'll only do a year at a time. You can renew after that. But that one's a travel insurance that requires you to still have a home residence. And say if it's Australia, you still need a home residence in Australia. The other option is there are digital nomad insurances that you pay monthly. But once again, you've got to read through them and make sure a lot of them don't include things like being medevaced out of the country, which is a big expense. You know, that's where people run into a lot of trouble. Or there's proper expat insurance which is expensive. You know, for a family, it's around about 7,000 Australian dollars a year. But those ones are very comprehensive. They're very comprehensive. They allow you to be medically covered, a lot of them anywhere in the world.
Wow.
You know, so you can go back to Australia and it acts as your private health insurance there as well.
Wow. And given how much private health insurance is here.
Exactly. So it doesn't work out all that different, but there's definitely a lot of homework to be done there. And that's not something that you should just go, oh, that works for them, so I'm going to get that insurance. Like that's something that's very individual to your family and your circumstance and the way you want to travel and how much you're comfortable being insured for. For us, I'm more than happy to pay for our doctors and dentists and our medicine and not be able to claim that back, because
Yes.
all of that is actually relatively inexpensive. So to bring my insurance down, I don't have any of that included. I just pay for that as we go. My thing is being covered for when we are admitted to hospital and if we
Yes.
needed to be medevaced out of the country.
Yeah, 100%. And very
Yeah.
sensible. And in terms of, buying or renting a house in Bali, how does that work for an expat?
So for an expat, the safest and easiest way is to long-term lease. So you can come over and you can lease. There's not a lot of monthly rentals. There are some, but there's not a lot of monthly rentals, but there's quite a few yearly rentals. So when we first moved over, we found a villa we were comfortable with and we rented for a year. But it's not like Australia. You don't pay weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. You pay for the year.
Yes, upfront,
So
upfront, isn't it?
up front. So
Yeah.
once again, there's a lot of homework to be done on that context too. You should never do that like while you're in Australia. Oh, I found this property online, I'm going to pay for the year. Don't ever do that. You need to, what my advice to anyone who's moving here is find somewhere that you're going to pay a bit more for your first month.
Yes.
But then spend that month, give yourself time to go around, to look, to check the area, make sure it doesn't flood, make sure it doesn't have a big burning field right beside it, make sure those photos aren't 20 years old, check for water damage, that your house isn't going to leak when the rain comes. And so we rented a place, we paid for a year, we were still happy in there, we paid for a second year, then we realized, no, we're going to be here long term. So then we found a longer lease option where we bought the lease for 6 years, and then we've just recently extended it for another 6 years. But once again, we've paid that upfront to get a really low price.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of money to come up with, isn't it?
It's a lot of money to come up with. And it's the same with if you're looking at when they say buying a villa here, basically you're buying a lease. The only way, no foreigner can freehold own here. You can have a company like my company, which is called a PTPMA, and we could buy, the company could own a property, but an individual cannot own, a foreign individual cannot own a property, but they can safely long-term lease.
And what sort of money do you have to pay, say, as a mum, dad, 2 kids, for a decent house in Bali? A year or a month?
I think if it really depends on so many factors. So for example, where I live in Sanua, there's a big bypass that runs along, and one side of the bypass everybody refers to as the beach side because you're closer to the beach. The other side of the bypass is called the west side. Now, depending on your proximity to the beach will depend on how expensive, just like in Australia, how expensive your property is. But say you wanted to be beachside, you want a 3-bedroom and you only want to rent it for a year. At the moment's prices, you'll be looking between probably like 20 to 30,000 Australian dollars a year.
Okay.
Right. But when we first moved here, that price was more like 15 to 25. So it has definitely gone up with the popularity of so many people moving here post-COVID. But if you're willing to live over on the other side of the bypass, you can often take $5,000 to $10,000 off that price per year.
Right. And who's there? Who are the expats? Where are they all from now?
Gosh, everywhere. So there's obviously a lot of Australians. There's a lot of different Europeans. Like there's a huge Italian community here. So lots of people from the UK and more recently, a lot of Russians and Ukrainians, escaping the war scenario. And, a lot of the big money that's come over that's driven the prices up of everything at the moment is coming from the Russians who are bringing the money in and buying up. So basically they pay a lot of money for their property and then that raises the price for everybody else.
And look, they've been getting a lot of bad publicity, both the Russians and the Ukrainians within Indonesia, saying that they're really loud, that they're taking over the local businesses, that they get drunk, a little bit like the bad publicity that Australians were getting pre-COVID for the similar type of behaviour. You're living there, Karlie. What's your take on that?
Oh, look, it's good. It gives us Aussies a break. No, definitely they have been. I mean, we've seen it all happen with there is a big, they are a big community and they stick together, the Russians, and there has been a lot of illegal work going on, because here it's got very strict rules about what you can and can't do on your visa.
Yeah.
Even me as a company owner, and I own my own company, there are big restrictions on what I'm allowed to do in my own company as far as my visa laws go. And what's happened is a lot of that, there's been a lot in that Russian community who have come over on their B211 visas, which only allows you to work online and take money outside of Indonesia, who have then set up their businesses here and have been trading between each other. So it seems to have settled down a lot in the last couple of months, but about 4 months ago, it was at a really big peak where the locals were getting really cross with them. And there was, like
Fair
these
enough.
instant
They're taking your
accounts.
business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess for people even like me, who we've paid the money to set up our companies legally, we pay the money to have legal visas, we pay all our taxes. It's very hard to compete with somebody who is doing something, not so much in my industry, but in other people's industries. It's hard to compete with somebody who hasn't set it up legally and spent that money, because they can price it so much lower to still make a profit.
Right. I see. No,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yes.
And look, talk us through luxury in Bali, because, I run a luxury social media platform, and often people come to me and say, gosh, you spend a lot of time in Bali. You seem, we know you like luxury. Is there real luxury in Bali? What's your response to that question?
Wow. The luxury scene in Bali, even over the past 7 years that I've been here, has just expanded so much. And we get that as well. Bali is only for bogans, or people only go to Bali because it's a cheap holiday. Honestly, Bali's luxury travel scene is world class and actually outperforms a lot of the other luxury experiences we've had in other countries, including Australia.
Yes.
Including Australia, because lots of reasons. One, obviously, the hospitality in Bali and Indonesia as a whole. Personally, I think there is no more of a hospitable nation than Indonesia, right? So straight away, your service level is very, very high. But the venues, oh my goodness, the luxury scene here, you've got everything from Capella in 2020, which is in Ubud, won the best resort in the world.
Yes.
For they've got and I use the term glamping very, very loosely there, because it's like a super, 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 super luxury glamping with these beautiful Indonesian tent-like villas filled with artifacts and
Bill Bensley designed it, and I mean Bill Bensley is like the leading architect in Southeast Asia. I've stayed there. And
you stayed there, so the Capella. Yeah. So
it's something that's just quite extraordinary. I mean, it is world class, literally. The design, the service, and the GM there, Mark. I mean, he's from Amman, so you get that level of service on top of this world class, setting. And I think one of the great things about that resort is that when Bill Bensley built it, there was not one tree cut down.
No, love that about that resort, that they designed that whole property around every tree that was already existing on that property.
Yes.
And there's lots of those interesting kind of properties coming up in Bali. So you have everything from those really unique experiences, luxury experiences like Capella, the beautiful Alila Uluwatu with their gorgeous cliffside villas where you're just looking right out, over the cliff there. You have places like, I don't know if you've been into the Ayana resort lately, but
no, I haven't. That's in Uluwatu as well?
That one's in Jimbaran. And it's got the rock bar. The rock bar is quite famous with Australians, not as famous as Ayana itself as a resort, but that's expanded into a huge complex now where it's actually like 4 resorts. It's got a whole tram system that runs throughout the resort. It's got 15 pools throughout the entire estate, and it's got 23 F&B outlets throughout the
that's insane. That's
insane. And there's properties like this. There's the Kempinski that's got 6 restaurants on site, including the underground aquarium restaurant that you go into. There really is a luxury offer for everyone in Bali. So the luxury scene is alive and well. And we have 2 types of travelers to Bali. We have the ones that go, oh, that's too expensive to spend in Bali. And that's great. And that Bali is still here for everyone who wants that. You can still get a lovely little homestay for, you know, $30 a night, and you can go and have your $2.50 nasi goreng down the beach, and you can have a great time. But you can also come over here and spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a night if you want to, and have a world class luxury experience. And there's plenty of properties to choose from. You know, the Four Seasons, the Bulgari, the Sofitel, the Kempinski. Like there's so many different luxury properties here.
I mean, even the W. I mean, the W in Seminyak is,
the W is
a fabulously located property for, you know, particularly for groups of, you know, young people coming for a party. Oberoi, Seminyak is one of my favorites.
Oberoi, Como, the Como resorts, super luxury, super beautiful. You know, you go up to Como Shambhala in Ubud, where John Legend and Chrissy Teigen always come to holiday there because it's such a lush retreat experience. So it's actually, there's a lot of celebrities actually who come to Bali that you never get to hear about because, you know, the hotels are under NDAs, but who come and choose Bali to have that luxury experience.
Yes, no, absolutely. And tell us about the food, because I always, people are always shocked because I, you know, was living in Jakarta, and the food there is just off the charts. I mean, it's some of the best food in the world. I think because you know, Indonesia traditionally, or at least Jakarta, is not focused on alcohol. So therefore, as a culture, they really are focused and obsessed with food. So you get these incredible restaurants, incredible quality of food. And how about Bali? How's the food evolved there in the last 7 years?
The Bali food scene is some of the best in the world because Bali is such a lovely place to live. It really attracts a lot of chefs who are doing interesting things. And like you said, Indonesians really love food. So they're very happy to invest in really interesting dining experiences. I mean, you've just got everything. That's something everybody will always ask me is like, where's your favorite restaurants in Bali? And I'm like, well, it depends what type of experience you want to have. Are you going because you want to have drinks and friends and you want vibe? Do you want fine dining? Do you want, because there's everything here. For fine dining, I still think it's hard to beat. If you the food, it's hard to beat the St. Regis Kayu Putih restaurant, and they do an amazing Sunday brunch that you have to book super early to get into because it only takes around 40 people, I think.
Wow.
But that food is just incredible, world class, incredible. In recent years, The Edge in Uluwatu opened up The Cave, which is an actual living 25,000-year-old cave that you go down into dine, and you have an 8-course degustation by Chef Ryan Cliff, who's famous in Singapore, who he came over and did the consulting and sent his number one chef, Chef Chan, over here to do the cave. And that experience is like nothing else, because not only is the food so interesting and so delicious, but you're sitting in a cave and they do this amazing light show between every course there, and you can get it paired with wine, you can get it paired with cocktails, you can get it paired with mocktails if you want to do the pairing. Another favorite is Kuka in Jimbaran, and Virginia and Kevin, who opened Kuka, you know, they traveled around the world chefing for all different luxury resorts, and then they opened Kuka, and it's like a really interesting luxury tapas experience that's really fun, where every dish and every ingredient has to be sourced from Indonesia. So they don't even so much as use olive oil because it's not made in Indonesia. Yeah. So there's these really interesting dining experiences. And of course, the level of service is just so high here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And then what about sustainability? What's your take on sustainability within the luxury hotels and just within the island of Bali? Because before COVID, I think it was fair to say that, you know, there were a lot of concerns about Bali, that it really was in trouble with a lot of marine life suffering, but just because the sea was so polluted, the land was so polluted. I think, you know, for Bali, COVID was a godsend in that sense, because it just cleared all the rubbish out, right? But where is it at now? What do you see happening, Karlie?
So two parts. There's still a lot of education to go. You know, the pollution is, from my perspective, a generational problem where everything used to be made naturally here. And then when plastics got introduced into the system. Education didn't come with it. So when Balinese used to eat out of a palm leaf, they would throw it on the ground, you know,
Right.
and that education and that whole shift there. So there's still a lot of education, but it has come along in leaps and bounds. And there's been a lot of groups. There's a big group at the moment called Sungai Watch, and it's an American guy who's leading that, but he has a massive team, and he's just doing amazing things by cleaning rivers. And not only cleaning them, they repurpose everything they get out of that river, and they record it all. So they shame any of the mass producers whose products are ending up as waste, and that's made everybody accountable. It's made everybody accountable. And in the luxury scene, I think their sustainability is leaps and bounds ahead of especially America and Australia when it comes to sustainability in the luxury stays. Like, these guys really truly live and breathe it, and it's a big focus. Even the Four Seasons here has just opened Telu, their new bar, which is a zero waste bar. So not only do they do amazing cocktails, they're doing amazing even non-alcoholic gins and vodka, but everything that's made there, the whole bar is designed around having zero waste at the end of the day.
So they're recycling everything that they're throwing out.
Yeah. And then there's places like Potato Head, they've had their mission to get their waste down to 1%. I think it's at 3% at the moment. It's their goal to get it down 1%.
I think Alila Uluwatu's at 1%.
Yeah, and Alila's got its own recycle plant. There's the Roll Foundation that lots of luxury hotels partner with, and we did a tour of that. We did Global Discovery Day with the Renaissance in Uluwatu, and as part of that, they took us on a tour through the Roll Foundation, and in there they showed us how all of the luxury hotels, they come and collect all of their soap.
Yep.
And they employ disadvantaged locals to come in to repurpose it into new soap bars, and then they give that soap to orphanages or disadvantaged people. They do the same with like oil. Any oil that's going to be thrown out gets turned into candles that then gets used again in hotels, you know. So a lot of the luxury scene is incorporating this eco-friendly and sustainability into their activities. Right. 100%. By taking people through these workshops, by educating them on what they're doing, you know, there's coral planting activities. So there's been, and the luxury sector in Bali is leading the way when it comes to not just giving lip service to being eco-friendly, but actually doing it. You don't find plastic bottles in luxury hotels in Bali at all anymore. Yeah.
No, I think it's fantastic. And it's interesting because I spend a lot of time traveling around the world, and Europe in that sense is behind, which is quite a shock because, you know, Europe has always led the way in that space, in the luxury hotel space. And at the moment, the sustainability, I mean, France has still got 2 more years till the government enforces the single-use plastic laws. You know, they just haven't happened yet. So, I mean, 2 years is a long time in this space.
Yeah, I feel like that too. When I go to other luxury hotels outside of Bali, I was like, wow, it really brings home how far ahead Bali is in this space.
100%. In fact, I was going to ask you, Karlie, where do you and your family like to travel, and is it in luxury?
Do you know what? We are the most eclectic travelers you will ever meet. And literally, obviously Asia, we are drawn to Asia. We love traveling all over Asia. But we literally will stay in a little boutique homestay with the locals one night, and the next night will be in a luxury villa.
I think that's great with children. I'm a bit the same, because I think that you can see the difference, and also to appreciate that, you know, even a cheap hotel can be a fantastic experience. It's not all about what you spend. It's about how you enjoy what's on offer.
That's exactly right. So we do travel very, very, very eclectically, all the different star ranges. I mean, I love a good luxury stay, but I also love some of those little boutique properties where you get to know the story behind it. And there's one in Cedarman. It's actually it's boutique, but it's a luxury boutique, and it's called the Salmon Veya. And the owners there are a New Zealand couple. Both of them used to be child homicide detectives for 30 years. the two of
Wow.
them, husband and wife. And now they're over in Cedarman, which is a gorgeous little village by the river and by the rice fields. And they've created this beautiful, stunning property called the Salmon Vaya. And now they live their life out there. So I love learning that too.
Wow. And that's in Bali, isn't it? I didn't catch where Cedarman
That is in Bali. So
Wow.
Cedarman is one of my favorite areas to get away to in Bali. You know, when people think of Eat, Pray, Love, which is where it was filmed, and Ubud did
Right.
used to be like that until that movie came out. Because
Wow.
then that movie made Ubud so famous that Ubud's actually Ubud's still beautiful, but it's a very
Oh,
busy place now.
yes.
You know,
Like
there's
a lot
of
of Bali.
traffic.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of Bali.
So
I have to share my secret Eat, Pray, Love
secret
story.
spot.
Yes,
Yeah.
that I was at the Damawangsa Hotel in Jakarta. I don't know if you've been there. It's a beautiful luxury 5-star hotel. In fact, Jeremy Goring, a friend of mine, opened it about, I think, 15 years ago when it first opened as the GM there. It's a beautiful Aman-esque style hotel. I was there with my children who were staying there. I was having a chocolate martini at the bar, which they're world famous for. And this old guy, with respect, like quite old, was playing music on the traditional Indonesian kind of
Gamelan.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And anyway, he stopped playing and he came over and spoke to us and he spoke to the children and he was giving them spiritual advice. And he had this energy. And he turned around, he looked at my daughter and he said, "Don't forget to eat, pray, love." And she went, "What do you mean?" And then she went onto YouTube and it was the guy from Eat, Pray, Love that Julia Roberts goes to see in Ubud in Bali. He is working and playing music at the Damawangsa in Jakarta. And he's so wonderful and spiritual. And we had our own little Eat, Pray, Love moment with him.
So cool. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people coming over here to seek that experience, and even a new resurgence in, I don't know if you watched Ticket to Paradise with George Clooney and Julia Roberts.
No, I need to see it.
That movie is set in Bali, but it was filmed in Australia.
Yes, no, I knew that. That's right.
Yeah. So we kind of laugh because there's so many inaccuracies in that film. But of course, if you've never been to Bali, you don't know that it's filmed in Australia.
Does it look like Bali? Does it look like Bali or?
Not really. It looks like a beautiful tropical island because it is. It's the Whitsundays in Australia. But no, it doesn't really look like Bali, but it has, like, especially with the Americans, we saw our when that movie come out, like the visitors to our website, the Americans like, oh, we need to go to Bali. So it has kind of given that resurgence again. But yeah, when people ask me about that and they go like, I want an Eat, Pray, Love experience, I'm like, you can still have that in Bali, but probably not in Ubud. You have to be either staying in the outskirts of Ubud, or something like Cedarman, where you are in that nature and you are surrounded by rice fields and rivers and local.
But don't expect luxury hotels. That's the problem. People go to those places and say, well, where's all this amazing food? It's like, no, that's back in Seminyak.
That's back there. Well, I can tell you that the Salmon Vaya does a very good job of food, and they are in Cedarman. So that's
you sold me. I have to go there.
Oh, you have to. You'll see the pictures and you'll want to go for sure.
Done. I can talk to you all day and we have to meet next time I'm in Bali.
Yes, definitely.
We ask all our guests, and you can tell us about your next holiday plans or what you're doing today, but where to from here for you?
Something so exciting and a big bucket list moment for me. Next week, I'm embarking on a journey on a luxury ship called the Aqua Blue.
Wow.
The Aqua Blue is an old Navy ship that's been repurposed into a luxury cruising ship. It's only got 15 rooms. So you imagine a huge Navy ship, only 15 rooms. I've been on it once before for a party. And the minute I stepped foot on there for a party, I was like, one day I have to sail on this. So we'll be flying over to Labuan Bajo, which is on the island of Flores. It's about an hour's flight on Bali. And then we will board the ship there, the Aqua Blue, and then we're going to spend 7 days sailing back to Bali. And we'll go to Pink Beach and we'll go to Komodo Island. We're going to go snorkeling with the whale sharks. Glorious. And this is like an absolute luxury experience. The boat is insane, the menu, the food. I've just done all of the onboarding where they want to know everything from how you take your coffee or tea in the morning, so that they can make sure that everything is just as you like it once you get on that ship. So
sounds heaven. Well, you have a wonderful time. And thank you
Yes,
for sharing all your insider tips about Bali.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's absolutely fine. And I hope to see you the next time that I come to Bali.
Definitely. It's a date.
Okay. Have a great day, Karlie.
Bye.
Bye now.
Don't forget to subscribe here and follow us on Instagram and Facebook for regular travel updates. You can also hear our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.